Hi, this is Scott from the Waterwise Community Center, and today we are going to replace this standard 4-inch lawn pop-up sprinkler with a high-efficiency sprinkler on a taller riser as an example of how to go about improving or retrofitting a lawn irrigation system to be able to properly use high-efficiency overhead irrigation on a new Waterwise or California native landscape. First thing we need to do is move the mulch out from around this sprinkler. This is an area that had been completely abandoned for a while. It had been sheet mulched, so using cardboard as a biodegradable weed barrier to smother the lawn. And now it's time to come back and retrofit the irrigation system. And so I like to just clear out the mulch a little bit to make sure that we're not going to be getting a bunch of mulch down in our hole that we'll need to dig to remove this sprinkler. Next is actually digging out the sprinkler. I prefer to have a tub nearby. There's a variety of companies that make handy gardening tubs like this, and it's just really convenient, especially if you have a mulched garden, to be able to dump that soil just into a tub to keep the soil separated from the mulch and to be able to easily backfill. If I was doing this with a bunch of sprinklers, I would use a smaller trenching shovel. It saves you from needing to make as large of a hole. But a lot of people aren't going to have that at home, and if you're just doing a small yard, you can absolutely just use a normal shovel. You just make it a little bit larger of a hole. Very important to use a spade, pointed shovel though. Flat shovel, if that's all you have, is not going to get you very far. You can get a decent quality spade at any landscape supply store or hardware store. So we have very gravelly soil here. Decent amount of rock in it. You can see we're starting to expose our sprinkler body. Be careful as you go to feel around for pipe. Make sure you're not going to be breaking any pipes. It's not something that you would easily do if you have the kind of piping which I always recommend, which is the Schedule 40 wall thickness, but sometimes you'll have thinner Class 200 pipe in a residential landscape, and that stuff can actually be pretty easy to break with a shovel. Another reason to be careful here, you can see coming through here, we have some buried sprinkler wire. This is from a valve manifold on the other side of the house. I didn't originally put in this sprinkler system, so I wasn't sure exactly where this came through. So it's a good thing that we went kind of carefully and gently and did not break that. So you can see here, our sprinkler body has been exposed. This is a very standard size sprinkler, and fortunately this was put in using kind of a best practice technique of using what's called a swing joint, which is some flexible plastic which then has a threaded coupling at the end, and so that's for if the sprinkler gets kicked or stood on or anything like that, it doesn't snap off the PVC supply line. Sometimes it'll just be some solid pipe on a riser right on top, and that's not as good of a system. But with this, all you have to do is unscrew your sprinkler body. And from there, we're going to start up with this part where we can adapt to our solid riser and fix things right in the ground. We'll also show what you would do if you need to move this a little bit, but the first simplest iteration of this would be if you have a lawn sprinkler system where all the sprinklers are in a good place, you have that good head-to-head coverage, and all you need to do is get these things up taller to be able to shoot over your closest shrub and be able to water your new landscape well. So our next step is going to be to use this threaded coupling to go from our male pipe thread end of our swing joint onto this coupling and adapt it to this 2-foot riser, which is also a male pipe thread on the end of each bit of the riser. And to do that and get a good seal, we're going to use thread seal tape or Teflon tape. And Teflon tape can be a little bit awkward to use when you're getting used to it, but then once you get it, it's kind of just muscle memory. So you're going to wrap the end of the tape on, trying to keep everything clean, and then wrap. If you're looking down at it, it's always going to be in a clockwise fashion. It's also said to go in the direction of the threads, meaning the direction that as you tighten it down, this tape, as it compresses, is going to get tighter. If you do it in the wrong direction, it'll kind of bunch up and get loose, and you won't get that watertight seal. 3 times around is all you need. And then with these threaded couplings, especially on this side of the valve that aren't continuously with pressure on them, you really just want to get them hand tight unless you identify any sort of leak. It's usually all you need, and you can over tighten. So Teflon tape and hand tight, and now same thing, Teflon tape on all the threads. Smooth it out so you're only getting 1 layer at a time. Once around, twice around, 3 times, and then when you're done, you just pull it, smooth it down, and then this carefully, to make sure that the threads are aligned, slides and then twists in. One trick that you can use if you're not sure if the threads are aligned is you can actually turn it counterclockwise just lightly, so it's going a little backwards, and then when it does get aligned, you'll feel it kind of click into place, and then from there you can tighten it. You don't want to just kind of guess and start tightening, because you can actually strip the threads, damage them, and render one or both pieces useless if the threads are damaged. So screw that all in, hand tight, and there you go. From here, what we'll do is secure this, and then we would flush our system by sending water through to flush out any dirt that might have gotten in it just before we put on our actual sprinkler, because we don't want to get it clogged. If you were doing a lot of these, a whole yard, I would recommend doing everything that you can do in terms of assembly outside of the hole first. Keep less dirt and things. It makes it a little bit easier, especially if it's a hot day. So if I was doing 20 of these, I would definitely have attached these 2 pieces, the coupler and the riser, ahead of time, had my whole pile of them, and then just come out. You don't want to attach your sprinkler nozzles on, because you really do need to flush that, but since we're just doing one, it doesn't make that much of a difference. So the next thing we need to do is to secure this solid riser in place so that if it gets bumped, it doesn't kind of fall over, or it doesn't get misadjusted. Even if you pack the soil down really tightly around it, it's just not really going to be sturdy enough. So we need a strategy to secure it. My favorite way to do that is to take a 1/2 inch, sometimes called number 4, piece of rebar cut to a 2-foot length. This is something that's available pre-cut. You can get it at any landscape supply store that sells landscape and irrigation products, the specialty stores, or you can also usually get them at the concrete section of the big box hardware store. And what we'll do is we will pound this into the ground about 1 foot, and then we will put a metal strap on to really secure it well long term. This is something where you really want to make sure that you're not going to be pounding this directly into one of your irrigation pipes or irrigation lines. It's something, just another reason to have called Dig Alert before working on your project, to make sure, especially if you're in a newer community, that there's no buried fiber optic lines or any other utility lines in that area of your house. And so what I like to do is to dig around just a little bit more to make sure that we're not going to be really putting our rebar right down into our irrigation pipe. Now this is a corner, and with where the swing joint is coming from here, I'm pretty sure that the pipe kind of goes this way and then goes off that way. It doesn't get this far, but just a little bit more work. This pipe isn't very, very deep, could really tell us for sure. And that's probably all I need, because we can tell from the angle that the swing joint is coming out that this pipe isn't very, very deep. If I'm digging a trench for new pipe to go in the ground, I like to make it a foot deep, but oftentimes you'll find sprinkler systems that are installed quite a bit more shallow than that. So what we can do is just bring this soil back in. We want this to rest on a decent base, so you can use a boot to just pack this in. Anytime you're digging as well, you have a pair of boots, really recommend it. It's a lot better for kicking the shovel. You get more force through, it's more efficient digging, it's easier on your feet at the end of the day. So something like this, if this was a really deep hole, we might go ahead and backfill before we hit the rebar in, but here I still have plenty of soil depth to secure it, and if I hit the rebar in before I backfill, because it's only a few inches deep in terms of the hole, then I just know that I'm not going to be sending this through any part of my newly installed area. But I usually do get this far first so that I can really make sure that things line up just right. It's kind of a pain, and it doesn't look great if this is a couple inches off and then tightening everything and it's coming together at weird angles. Another thing is that you don't want to go through ever and hit in a bunch of rebar and walk away from the project, or even come back the next day. Rebar sticking straight up out of the ground by itself, it's pretty hazardous to be out in the garden if somebody trips and falls on it. Once this is all together and then you have your sprinkler on top, it's really not very hazardous, but nobody wants to fall on a piece of rebar. So I only do this right before I'm about to finish a whole sprinkler. With that, you can see this is one that's reused. There's a little curve on it. It's been used for a few garden projects, so I'll put that side down. And I really recommend using, if you're going to be doing a lot of these, investing or borrowing. This is a 4-pound sledgehammer, which you can get from any hardware store. It really has the weight you need to be able to drive a piece of rebar into the ground, especially if there's any gravel in the ground or if you have harder clay soil. If you have harder clay soil, you want to make sure that your soil is also not bone dry when you do it. You might water the area some a few days before, try to get the water to penetrate, and then let it dry down so it's not muddy. That'll make all your hole digging a lot easier as well. And it's just, you get a lot more force, and it's a lot easier to make sure you hit the thing all the time than with the standard hammer. It's really slow going hitting in this rebar into soil with the standard hammer. Always make sure you're wearing glasses, sort of eye protection. Here you can see we have really gravelly soil. You can already feel hit some sort of rock. So I'm going to have to slightly shift the position. That's a little bit better. There, so you can see, I had to shift it to be a little bit off. I'm going to try to flex this around some. That'll form a pretty nice, tight, secure connection. So I'm going to go grab my strap to secure this all together, and we'll take on the next step. So for our next step, we're going to slide this over the top, and as we tighten this, when the slack is picked up, a little bit of this metal is going to go out on the same side that the screw is coming from. And that can be somewhat sharp, especially if like someone's running by and they scrape their shin on it or something like that. So I kind of think about that, and as I tighten it, I have this go out away from the path of travel. And then if you want to be really careful about it, like in our demonstration garden, we even put some durable outdoor tape over it. If you want to avoid something like this, which is a really good solution because it will stay tight long term, it could be tightened if it was ever needed to. Outdoor UV rated zip ties work just fine, but you'll usually only get a couple of years out of them before you have to replace them. So they're a cheaper option, but you over time end up with some plastic in your yard, and there is a replacement factor where this will be kind of do it once and it's going to be there. You don't need to do it at the very, very top. I'll do it a few inches down. It provides really good support both upwards and downwards on the pipe. And if you're doing a lot of these, it's useful to do it with a small like electric screwdriver, small handheld drill driver type setup. And these things have a hex head as well. So if you have a variety of drill attachments, you might have a hex head that makes it really, really quick work. So again, just for one, screwdriver is just fine. Definitely a small screwdriver makes it easier to keep everything balanced in this application, and a screwdriver is just fine. But if you're doing a whole yard and you have that driver anyways, where you can tighten these really quickly, that'll just save you some time. So just tight enough that everything is secure. So this is fine. And you might be thinking at this point that this is not the most attractive thing to have standing up in your garden. And that would be true if there weren't any plants in your garden. But what I find is that once the garden starts to grow in, these things are there. If you look for them, they're there. It actually makes it a little bit easier when you're checking your system every month or so to turn everything on and make sure that there's no issues. But they really just kind of blend into the background once everyone's eye are on the plants. And once the sprinklers are on these, one of our local native birds, the black phoebe, really likes to perch on these, and they're insect eaters. And so they'll come around the garden, they'll perch on these, they'll kind of look out and see what there is to eat, and then you'll see them do these dramatic dives and swoops off of them, sometimes almost flips in the air as they catch a bug or two. So it's kind of cool to see them using these, and it gives them a nice hunting spot in the yard. Normally, what I would do is get all of the sprinklers converted up to this point, and then we'll go through the process of flushing each one. We won't actually flush this individual sprinkler because this area was so abandoned that there is no water flow. I'm just using this as a nice location to demonstrate it. From this point, after this has been flushed, it becomes time to install your shrub head adapter and your sprinkler nozzle. Now you're going to need a shrub head adapter because the thread pattern that's on a sprinkler nozzle is not the same as the 1/2-inch pipe thread that is on these risers. It's a larger thread. You can see it doesn't fit. And so a shrub head adapter basically is just the little thing you need to change the thread patterns. And based on what you have going on in your yard in terms of water pressure and whether or not you have any pressure reducers farther up the line before the water is fed to this, will decide what you do in terms of a shrub head adapter. The simplest and most common, if your pressure is already within the area where you're going to want it for your spray system, which for our high efficiency sprays is somewhere between 30 and 40 pounds per square inch, or 30 and 40 psi. If you have already gotten there, usually that means because you have some sort of pressure regulation upstream, either at your valve or before your valve, then you're just going to screw on one of these very simple shrub head adapters. It's just a very simple piece of plastic that has a female thread that matches the riser, and then a male thread that matches our sprinkler nozzle. And then for our sprinkler nozzles, for this example and what we're showing today, we're going to be using the Hunter MP Rotator series, which is a great rotating nozzle. There's also ones made by other companies as well. And so with that, we just screw this on. Again, hand tight. And once we've done that and fully flushed the system on all of them, we're going to backfill. We'll step down the soil some as we go so we get a nice firm backfill. And then we'll begin to adjust our sprinklers. Now, I'm not going to go through the backfill process here because we're also going to look at a couple of other scenarios which we run into very often when people are adapting their lawn sprinkler system over to a new high efficiency sprinkler system on a solid riser that's going to water a Waterwise or a native garden. One of the things that we often see is that the landscape irrigation system wasn't really laid out ideally the first time. And so some sprinklers might need to be moved, or you might even need to add a sprinkler to really get that head-to-head coverage that we are looking for. And so if that's the case, we can take an approach where we will add some additional flexible pipe on and then go through this same process once we've arrived in the desired location for our new sprinkler system. So we don't need to start gluing PVC pipe and really do a lot of trenching in most cases. We can just start here and go from there. So let's say, for example, instead of having our new sprinkler be here, we decided, based on measurements and our new garden design and our layout, for whatever reason, that we needed to move our sprinkler a few feet. In this case, maybe 3 feet to where this white flag is. Maybe it's 5 feet, just whatever. As long as you decide that you need to move it, you don't necessarily need to go back to your PVC pipe, start gluing and moving things around. You can use the same material that's used in these swing joint fittings, and you could buy it in a roll. The most common roll you'll find available, whether it's landscape irrigation supply stores or the big box hardware store, is made by Rainbird, and it's called swing pipe. Sometimes you see it called flex pipe. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as funny pipe, but it's swing pipe, and you get it in a 100-foot roll. Whenever you're dealing with a roll of a pipe, whether it's drip pipe, this sort of stuff, you always want to leave the wrapping on the outside and just open it up from the inside, and then there'll be a piece you can start from there. That keeps everything nice and contained instead of uncoiling all over the place as you do the work. It's always really convenient, but especially if you're doing the work by yourself, it's really going to save you a lot of headache and hassle. And then this stuff, you can just coil out as much as you need of it, and then you can cut it with a sharp pipe cutter and use some specialized fittings for this material and get your pipe to wherever you need it. It's not a good idea to use it to try to install a whole irrigation system, because it doesn't put a huge amount of water through this little diameter pipe compared to like a 3/4 inch PVC pipe. You just can't get as much water through it, but for 1 or 2 sprinklers, it is absolutely just fine. And so these have their own fittings, their own adapter. So again, we're back at this 1/2 inch pipe thread, and so we need an adapter that's going to be a female 1/2 inch pipe thread over to the spiral barb, it's what it's called, to use for the swing pipe. And so you can get them in a variety of configurations, but this is going to be our most useful one for these sorts of projects, which is going to be a female pipe thread 92 spiral barb. And so with that, we'll start by going back to our swing joint with some fresh Teflon tape. Get that wrap. Making sure it doesn't get bunched up. It's always a little bit awkward working in a hole. Good. Smooth it out. Line up our threads. Twist it on. And then with this, you're going to have some flexibility. You're going to be able to determine where this stops. You're just going to want to flex things around until you're set up in the right direction. This is going to be more convenient to go up. Screw it in a little bit more. And then we're going to be sending our pipe in the right direction. And it is up to you if you want to fully bury this swing pipe, or for example, in this area, if it's an area that's always going to have wood chip mulch on it, it would be just fine for the pipe. Maybe a little bit easier for you in the future if you just laid it right on the surface and put the wood chip mulch on top of it, just like you were laying out some drip line or something like that. Either way, it's really up to you. If I know I'm always going to have wood chip there, then I might do it on the surface, but I might bury it just a little bit to make sure that I never have to really see it again if the wood chips get thin, if I have the right setup for that and I have time for the project. Something that you're always going to want to do when you are about to run a pipe like this is make sure that all the mulch, any of your obstructions are out of the way. It's better to go a little bit past the area that you're going to be running the pipe to. Make sure you have a good working surface to get everything where it needs to go. So that's good enough. Doesn't need to be a work of art. And then you're going to want to measure how much of this pipe you're going to need to get over there. So here we have about 2 feet, 4.5, 2 feet 5, 2 feet 6 inches. Always double check and make sure your measuring tape gets all the way there. 2 feet 6 inches. And by the time you put the barb fitting on, it might go a little further. We might need to trim a little bit off the end, but I always try to cut a little bit generous because you can always trim a little bit off the end, but if you don't have enough, you need to start over. So we'll measure out our 2 feet 6 inches of pipe. That'll get us to about here. And then you'll use a pipe cutter meant for poly or plastic pipe. This is the same, they come in different colors. This is a brand sold at the hardware store. It's blue. Most irrigation supply stores will carry a purple one made by Rainbird. But essentially it's a sharp blade that you can rest the pipe in, and then you just clamp down. It's the same tool if you're using like PEX plastic plumbing pipe. Same tool used for cutting the PEX pipe. Great tool for cutting drip lines. If you have a really sharp garden shears, normal bypass pruners, you can use that as well, but it's really not a bad idea if you're doing a bunch of this and going to be doing work with drip line to have something like this. It really gives you nice clean cuts. And so with that, next part is the most awkward part of working with this, and sometimes it is actually worth having a second person because you have to spin this onto that spiral barb. And so you might flex it up and you press in a little bit and you just spin this around. And oftentimes I'll get a little bit of dirt in it and stuff, so really important to flush afterwards. Not too bad if it's just a couple of feet. If you're doing like 5 feet or so, it's useful to have someone on the other side who's going to be helping manage the other end of the pipe. And it just slowly works, and you don't need to push super hard. And twist. And for a good long-term solid seal, you really want to twist it on all the way so that it's fully seated. Because this seal is just based on the compression as the spiral just forces the pipe to flex out a little bit. So you want to make sure it's on there really well. And with that, you can see we're going to cut probably just a little bit off before we add on our next piece, which is going to be the exact same adapter that we used on this swing joint, but now we're going to put it back onto the swing pipe, and then our riser can come directly off of that, and our rebar will secure the whole thing. But what if, for example, you also need to add one other pipe that's going to be going off in another direction? There's just a gap in the sprinkler system. There's just one section that for whatever reason the landscaper missed a sprinkler. It's not head to head. It's always been a dry zone in the lawn. Is a good indicator that maybe something might be missing. And so you can actually add on another sprinkler as well. And you can't do this for an unlimited amount of time because there is only so much water that can get through these small pipes, but to add on 1 or 2 sprinklers is usually going to be just fine, especially because the high efficiency rotating nozzles that we're going to be using, part of that efficiency is they put out water much slower than a standard lawn irrigation sprinkler. And so with that, we can put more sprinklers on the same size pipe than generally the lawn sprinkler systems that we are replacing, unless it's a really recently installed one that was installed with high efficiency rotating sprinklers from the beginning, all new pipe. Then sometimes you don't gain this extra capacity with the switchover, but that's something that we almost never see. And so with that, you can use this T, and you can spiral it in on these two sides, and then you'll have another outlet where that pipe can go off in any direction you need it to. And so if we were doing that, we would splice this in here. Get the first barb all the way in. Get this out to the side it'll go out on. Put our second length of pipe on. And then with that, we can have our third length of pipe go off in whatever direction we need it to. And this stuff has a pretty good flex to it. It's much more flexible than PVC pipe. Similar, maybe even more flexible than drip line because of the kind of rubber it's made out of. So you really don't need to think like right angles and trenches. You can usually get this stuff to go wherever you need it to go. So I'm not going to actually run all of that because you get the idea. And then all of these at the end in the exact same way. And so you can see with each fitting we put in, we added a little bit of length to the line. So we'll need to do some trimming. So here, we know that we're going to want our line to end right here. And so we'll know that once we spiral the barb all the way on, the pipe's going to come to about right here. So that's going to be roughly where we cut the pipe. Make sure your fingers are out of the way. Cut that. And get our spiral barb fitting on. And from here, we're not going to need one of those female-to-female threaded adapters like we needed coming directly off that swing joint, because this adapter is already setting us up with the female pipe threads. And so with that, we can just take our riser, we would tape it, but I'm not going to do that in the interest of time. And screw it right on, making sure we match up those threads nicely. Screw it in. And as long as you are careful when you dig, which you should always be, because even sprinkler pipes might not be buried very deep. And generally when you're digging, you want to always peel back the mulch first. Then this is no problem for it to be just resting in the mulch as long as it always stays covered. Or if you're going to have like a decomposed granite or a gravel mulch, as long as it always stays covered. If there's just a little flex up in the line, you can use the same U-shaped metal 6-inch long staples that are used to secure drip irrigation tubing. And from there, you would hit in your rebar, attach everything, and you'd be good to go ahead and flush out your line and put your nozzles on, just like in the other example. And one last note, as your landscape continues to grow in, you might find that in certain areas, depending on the height of your plant material, you need to add either an additional 1-foot or 2-foot riser on top of your existing riser, which is easy to do by just unscrewing the shrub head adapter, putting in a threaded coupler and adding another riser, or for additional height, you can also add a pop-up sprinkler on top of that first riser. That concludes the tutorial. For more information about system design and other good tips, be sure to check out our retrofitting turf irrigation systems for Waterwise and California Native Gardens workshop recording on this YouTube channel, as well as our other resources on the topic. To stay up to date with everything we have going on and all of our free programs and offerings, be sure to sign up for our newsletter at the link on the screen, and we hope to see you sometime at the Waterwise Community Center.